After this session, there will be a toast offered by the Grand Orient Grand Master to 2017. And any of the books, even the ones that say display copy don't take, please take. And if you wish to take a supply because you have a lodge or a class or some good use, why, please do. We won't think you're greedy if we see you leaving with an assortment. It's certainly, you're welcome. Please watch the website for information, including about the videos. All of the sessions in all of the meeting rooms have been videoed by a professional team. They will be edited and they will be posted on the website. Please keep in mind that we will ask you to get your paper if you wish to be in a book. We feel there will be approximately 3 books arising out of the meetings, and they'll have appropriate titles. And in fairness to the other authors, we hope we will get these out this year and have your cooperation in getting them out and in facilitating the dissemination of what you've offered. The 2017 sessions will be at exactly the same time here in Paris, most probably the same sort of organization, and we will be certainly letting you know about all of that.
Bonjour. Regarding what Dr. Rich just said, some people have asked about the proceedings that we will publish. We will be contacting all of you. If you register for the conference, we do have your email address. If you did not register or you are interested, please give us your card or your email address so we can have it. The other thing is that at some time ago, we thought that we were going to have a post-conference meeting to get feedback for next conference, but unfortunately we don't have a space, the kind of a space that is like the Bibliothèque Nationale, that we want to have an academic neutral space when no issues of any sort could be thinking that we are going to a particular building for one reason or another, but the Bibliothèque Nationale is not available. So what we're going to do is we're going to send via email a survey, very simple, and two questions, direct questions about the themes and also other matters, but you will get it also via email. So please take us out your spam folder, because I know that we have sent you many emails, but this is going to be about the feedback, so we will appreciate your comments, and particularly for next 2017 academic conference. Okay. Thank you very much. Now, Paul.
You can stay here. You just stay. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Brent Morris. For 2 days prior to this conference, a group met, and he's going to tell you about what they did, what they found out, what questions remain. Brent Morris.
Merci. Bonjour, je suis Brent Morris et je parle français très mal. J'ai dit à mon bon ami Pierre Molière, aidez-moi parler français s'il vous plaît. Pierre a dit, tu es un mathématicien, n'est-ce pas? Mais oui, je suis un mathématicien. Bon. Pierre dit, ici, comptez les cartes. OK. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Mais non, en français. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Bon, bon. Tirez 3 cartes. 1, 2, 5. Non, répétez. Avec 6? Mais oui, avec 6. OK. 1, 2, 3, 4, cinq, six. Tirez trois cartes. Un, quatre, deux. Non, non. Répétez. Avec six? Mais oui, avec six. Un, deux, trois, quatre, cinq, six. Tirez trois cartes. Trois. Un, deux. Non. Répétez. Avec six? Mais oui, avec six. OK. Un, deux, trois, quatre, cinq, six. Tirez trois cartes. Un, deux, trois. Pierre dit, bon. C'est bon. C'est très bon. Comptez la carte. Un, deux, trois, quatre. Pierre dit, s'il vous plaît, Brent, parlez anglais. Welcome to the report on the Special Committee on the Franken Documents. I am Brent Morris, Managing Editor of the Scottish Rite Journal. Before I begin our report, I would like to make a few quick thank yous to Jean-Luc Graton of the Bibliothèque Nationale for supporting and hosting our conference, to Professor Paul Rich, the obsessive maniac who brought this conference to fruition in less than 12 months. And I describe him thus because only an obsessive maniac could do what he accomplished. To Pierre Molière of the Grand Orient Library, who has handled so many arrangements, especially those of the Franken Manuscript Study Group. Pierre is also incredibly generous. He told our committee that he had chilled a case of Dom Perignon for our refreshment. But when he found out that food and drink was not allowed with the manuscripts, he had to send the Dom Perignon back to the supply closet of the Grand Orient. Maybe next time. I have been asked to chair this special session on the Franken manuscripts because I am an amateur. In the basic sense of the word, I am a lover of the subject. For at least 25 years, I have been studying and tracking the manuscripts prepared by Henry Andrew Franken. It has been a dream of mine that all known copies of Franken manuscripts could be brought together to be studied. Pierre Molière, librarian of the Grand Orient de France, has taken this dream a step farther by arranging with the Bibliothèque Nationale de France to borrow the Santo Domingo manuscript, Bello FM 415. The Santo Domingo manuscript is a French collection of rituals that is a near, if not direct relative of Franken's manuscript. It is somewhat frightening for me to be thrust in this position. My formal background is in theoretical mathematics and computer algorithms, little connected to reality, and certainly nothing as real as paper or watermarks or ink, handwriting, and so on. Nonetheless, I volunteered, and so here we are. Well, perhaps more correctly, Paul Rich said to me, Brent, you've been talking about the Franken manuscript for years. Here's your chance to do something. Put up or shut up. I'll begin by giving a brief overview of Franken and what was known about his manuscript before the World Conference that we're finishing up. Then we'll talk about our study procedure and what we accomplished. The largest and most widely dispersed system of high-degree masonry is the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of 33 degrees. It originated in 1801 in Charleston, South Carolina, based upon the Order of the Royal Secret of 25 degrees, often called the Rite of Perfection. Unlike some high-degree systems, the ancient and accepted rite has a definite date of birth and well-known founders. Its parent, however, has a more shadowy genealogy. The Order of the Royal Secret seems to have appeared with Estienne Morin when he arrived in Santo Domingo in 1763, but its rituals and ceremonies are well known. Soon after his arrival, Morin set about establishing high-degree bodies and himself as the high-degree authority of the Western Hemisphere, or at least the Caribbean. Sometime between 1763 and 1767, Morin appointed Henry Andrew Franken, a naturalized British citizen and resident of Jamaica, Deputy Inspector General of all the superior degrees of free and accepted Masons in the West Indies. It was Franklin who first brought the order to the British colonies of North America, and also appointed other deputy inspectors who propagated the rite. He thus prepared the way for the birth of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. At least as important as spreading the royal secret, Franklin preserved its rituals by translating them from French into English and making at least 4 copies. The Scottish Rite thus has, in addition to a definite birthday and well-known founders, detailed rituals from its origins, unlike many other high-degree systems. There have been many subsequent changes and alterations to the rituals of the Scottish Rite by various supreme councils, but they all can be measured against the rituals of the Order of the Royal Secret and the foundational work of Henry Andrew Franklin. Much more is known about the life of Franklin than that of Marin. Franklin was born in 1720 and arrived in Jamaica in February 1757. Just over a year later, on March 2, 1758, he became a naturalized British citizen. A 1762 petition to the Vice Admiralty Court shows Franklin had been an appraiser, a marshal, and sergeant at mace in the court. In 1763, Estienne Marin passed through Jamaica on his way to Santo Domingo and then had his first opportunity to meet Franklin. Franklin's wife Elizabeth died the next year, 1764, and in 1765 he was appointed interpreter for Dutch and English for the Vice Admiralty Court. From these linguistic skills, we can infer he was born in Holland or perhaps a Dutch colony. As a professional translator, it's easy to see how he came to translate and transcribe the rituals of the Order of the Royal Secret. After being appointed court interpreter in 1765, and with the permission of Lieutenant Governor Moore, Franklin traveled to Albany, New York, and New York City, both with Dutch-speaking populations. He married Joanna Lowe of Newark, New Jersey, and on December 8, 1765, they became the godparents of Joanna Lowe, daughter of Nicholas and Sarah Lowe, Joanna's sister. So the niece and the wife had the same name. Now, from this fact, we can infer that Franklin was a Christian, else he would not have become a godparent under the Dutch Reformed Church with the obligation to see his godchild raised as a Christian. In 1767, he formed the Ineffable Lodge of Perfection in Albany, New York, and it opened January 11, 1768. In the charter he gave to the Ineffable Lodge of Perfection, he claimed authority from Stephen Marin. So we know by 1767 he had to have the authority, and he could have received it as early as 1763. So that's where we get the 4-year window when he could have met Marin, and we don't know where within that 4-year period it could have occurred. In 1768, he also did another very important act for the future of the Scottish Rite. He made Moses Michael Hayes a deputy inspector and Knight Kadash with the power to constitute grand chapters of Knights of the Sun and of Kadash in the West Indies and North America. Moses Michael Hayes went on to become one of the most important propagators of the Order of the Royal Secret in the United States, and that in turn set the stage for the Scottish Rite to come in. Franklin was one of 2 deputies specifically named a founding member of a grand chapter of Princes of the Royal Secret by Stephen Marin in Kingston on April 30th, 1770. In 1771, 4 to 8 years after meeting Marin, he produced his earliest known dated but unsigned book of constitutions and rituals for the 15th to the 25th degree. This manuscript was rediscovered in 1976 and is now in the possession of the Supreme Council for England and Wales. Its spine was marked Manuscript Ritual of the late Colonel Graham of Claverhouse, and a note says the manuscript once belonged to Captain Graham of Driney and Claverhouse, who after a period in the West Indies returned to Scotland. It's suffered the indignity of having the 25th degree cut out with a razor blade shortly after arriving in the Supreme Council. And it suffered near destruction when it was submerged in water for over 6 months when the bank vault in which it was stored flooded. The only possible good news to come out of the flooding is that the mildew that got on the paper turned it to a lovely shade of purple, which is the color of the Scottish Rite. That's desperately clutching at straws to look for good news. Franklin's second wife, Joanna, died in 1777, and in 1782 he was appointed Master of the Revels. This was a largely ceremonial post that gave him authority over all theatrical performances and the balls and entertainment by the governor. It also had an annual stipend of 100 guineas. As late as 1783, he was still the official Dutch interpreter for the island, and in that year he was appointed a customs inspector. Of greater Masonic interest, in 1783, Franklin prepared another manuscript with rituals of the 4th degree to the 25th degree for Deputy Inspector David Small, and he signed it. It was forgotten until 1855, when, according to a note in the London Freemasons magazine, it came into the possession of an unnamed English brother. It was purchased the next year by Enoch Terry Carson of Ohio, a prominent American Mason, and subsequently purchased by Samuel Crocker Lawrence of Massachusetts, upon whose death in 1911 it went to the Library of the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts. This version was rediscovered. You will notice a common thread in these stories. The manuscript keeps getting, these manuscripts continue to be forgotten, and then they're rediscovered. So it was rediscovered in 1935 in the archives of the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts and given to the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree for the Northern Masonic jurisdiction of the United States of America. Franklin prepared at least 2 other ritual manuscripts, but they do not contain details that let us date them. A third unsigned manuscript in Franklin's hand with the rituals for the 4th degree to the 25th degree was found in the archives of the Provincial Grand Lodge of Lancashire in Liverpool around 1984 and is on loan to the UGLE Library. On the verso of the first numbered folio is the inscription, "Received from John Caird, Edinburgh, James Caird, Liverpool, 30th August 1815. This is surrounded by a lengthy note by one M.A. Gage, recording that on the same date it was given to him by James Caird. He removed it to Liverpool in 1811. Reference to 1786 in the text provides evidence of the earliest possible date, but in 1795, when Franklin died, would of course be the last date that he possibly could have written it. The 4th undated but signed manuscript by Franklin, with rituals 4th through 25th degree, was possessed by Alexander Duker, possibly went to Prince Albert Victor, and was eventually went to H.J. Whymper, who gave it to the District Grand Lodge of the Punjab. It is now in the possession of Mr. Naveed Ahmed of Lahore, Pakistan. Little has been published about this version. The UGLE Library microfilmed it decades ago and cataloged it as the Rite of 25 Degrees, but without an author. Thus, it remained camouflaged from researchers using the search term Franklin, or Order of the Royal Secret, or Rite of Perfection, but it was rediscovered about 2010. Yet another case of it sitting on the shelf and someone finally finding it. In 1790, Franklin lost his post as customs inspector and requested financial aid from the government, having lost his job, been twice widowed, and having his house twice destroyed by hurricanes. The government twice gave him 100 pounds. In 1793, he was again appointed Master of the Revels, and in 1794, he was appointed Assistant Judge of the Court of Common Pleas for Port Royal, and he prepared his will that year. His will contained these instructions. It is my positive will that my funeral expenses not exceed the sum of 20 pounds currency. My coffin to be made a plain deal without any lining on the inside and only blackened outside. To be put into my coffin in the clothes I shall die in, and my body not to be washed, and to be carried to the grave without being carried in the church. Henry Andrew Franklin died May 20th, 1795, survived by his son, Parker Bennett Franklin of St. Kitts, his daughter, Mary Long Gutris, and his granddaughter, Elizabeth Gutris. He was buried May 24th in Kingston Parish Churchyard. This, then, is a brief summary of what we know about Henry Andrew Franklin and his manuscripts. What did we hope to discover over the 2 days we had to supply these documents? Perhaps little, or perhaps much. It all depended upon the gods of research. I think I can say that we made progress without being overly effusive about what we accomplished. Now, let me give you an example of what we looked for when examining the manuscripts. In 1997, while studying the 1783 manuscript in the library of the Supreme Council of the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction, I discovered that several of the pages facing the start of a degree, and imagine that the author is writing, he stops in the middle of the page, and then he goes to the next page and starts the next degree or the next chapter. On these pages, someone had inserted a piece of paper with the tracing board for the degree. These tracing boards remained undisturbed between the pages long enough for their images to transfer onto the facing page. Alain Marchesset, an antique book dealer who joined our studies, estimates it would take at least 3 to 6 months for the ink from the tracing boards to burn into the facing pages. In some cases, the acid in the paper of these extra pages has caused large rectangular stains. There are at least 9 such ghost images of tracing boards, and there may be more, but some technology other than the naked eye and ordinary light are required. As it turned out, no ghost images were found in any of the other versions that we examined earlier this week. They are unique to the 1783 Franken. While I hoped we would find something as dramatic as ghost images, I decided we would be satisfied if we could leave with intelligent questions. I was probably hoping for too much to think we could leave this conference with exciting new discoveries, but sometimes exciting questions are almost as good. Keep in mind that not all attendees agreed with every finding, not all attendees at the workshop agreed with every finding, or not as strongly as everyone else. Thus, what I will present are the consensus results. Number 1, the 1771 and West Lancashire Frankens are in a different hand from the other manuscripts. They are also not signed by Henry Andrew Franken. Most thought it was created by a different writer, but there was a strong dissent that may indeed have been written by Franken, but with altered writing, perhaps due to stress or trauma. Now, there is another manuscript known as the Jamaica manuscript. It is a copy of what Franken has written in a different hand. It was just reprinted by the Scottish Rite Research Society and is available for purchase on their page. 2, the 1783, West Lancashire, and Ahmed manuscripts are the same size with the same number of pages. The 1783 and Ahmed manuscripts have similar bindings. England and Wales was disbound as part of the conservation work after it was submerged, but Susan Snell will compare the preserved binding with that of West Lancashire. 3, the watermark on the paper of the Ahmed and West Lancashire bear GR for Georgius Rex. Susan Snell believes the watermark and common size and binding indicate these being common United Kingdom record books for use by courts and civil servants. Naveed Ahmed believes the paper and blank books were used by George III for his library. Susan will check the British and Jamaican government libraries for similar books with government records from the period, perhaps even finding a translation by Henry Andrew Franken, which would give us an additional way of checking his handwriting. 4, there is at least one missing intermediate text. The Santo Domingo manuscript, which the Bibliothèque Nationale so graciously let the Grand Orient borrow and it's been on display, the Santo Domingo manuscript is written in French. As one example of why the Santo Domingo is not the direct parent of the Franken manuscript, Louis Trebuchet shared that the ritual for the Night of the Sun has the ritual written compactly in the center of the page in a rectangle. But then on the margins, completely filling the margins, is additional information, extensions of the rituals. The Franken manuscript has both the marginal and the body material integrated together smoothly. There are many small variations in language in each of the Franken manuscripts. They all say the same thing, but in slightly different ways. This led Alain Marchesset to conclude that Franken translated each copy from a French mother document that represents the merged texts of the Santo Domingo. If there were an English mother document, there would be more consistency in the wording. 5, the 22nd degree, Prince of Libanus, in the 22nd degree, Prince of Libanus, each manuscript has a paragraph that begins, "This celebrated nation." However, the Ahmed manuscript, one of the oldest that we have, was written without the word celebrated, which was inserted later. They have the little V, and then they wrote celebrated above it. This leads us to conclude that while the Ahmed manuscript may be the oldest one that we have, it's not the English mother of the others, but reinforces our belief there is a French mother. 6. The United States had several lodges of perfection under the Order of the Royal Secret in the East Coast port cities: Charleston, South Carolina; Philadelphia, Pennsylvania; Newport, Rhode Island; Baltimore, Maryland; Albany, New York, and others. Yet none of them are known to have a copy of the Franken manuscript. It appears that Franken prepared and most likely sold these manuscripts to British officers as they all made their way back to Britain, with most coming through Scotland. They were not given to the lodges of perfection. We know that Franken was in difficult financial straits when he petitioned the Jamaican government for relief in 1790. Perhaps he supplemented his income with his skills as a professional scrivener, using blank books from the Jamaica's court supply cabinet and selling the fruits of his labor to British officers. This would explain the absence thus far in the archives of American lodges of perfection and the apparent travels to Great Britain via army officers. The different handwriting in the 1771, for example, could be explained by Franken subcontracting the work to a junior clerk. Franken, being the active Mason, he knew the market and he knew to whom he could sell the manuscripts, and so he turned to a junior clerk to do the tedious work of writing the manuscript. All agreed there are most likely other undiscovered copies made by Franken, or copies of Franken made by other writers in archives around the world. Now, to support this contention, I could not have planned this in advance. Last night, about 4:58, so this is 24 hours and 10 minutes ago, Paul Neenan wrote to me and to say there are 2 Franken manuscripts in The Hague, in the possession of the Latomia Foundation and the Supreme Council for the Netherlands. I was flabbergasted. Of course, now we have to rush over to The Hague and compare the handwriting, the paper, the binding, and the text. And so what this means is there will be one more report at the next World Conference. Thank you.
We can take a few questions if we have a mic for the gentleman over there, and or if you could just enunciate your question.
Is there a mic?
Maybe you can repeat, and then you can repeat the question.
Okay.
It's not a question, but it is an observation. You mentioned a famous name when you were discussing the Lancashire manuscript. You said that it came from Caird, through the agency of one M.A. Gage.
Yes.
M.A. Gage is extremely interesting, a dominant personality, and was the principal leader of the Wigan Rebellion, which led to the Wigan Grand Lodge. He particularly espoused the ancient tradition, which of course involved ceremonies which were not otherwise involved in the moderns, and that was one of many reasons for the rebellion that took place in approximately 1821 and thereabouts and afterwards.
What John said at the beginning was that the manuscript went through the possession of Caird, and from Caird to M.A. Gage, and that M.A. Gage was one of the leaders of the Liverpool Rebellion that led to the Grand Lodge of Wigan.
Yes, indeed. And through Gage's associations in that rebellion, and since he was obviously favoured by the giver of that manuscript, Caird, it is possible, for instance, that we will be able to find something out about Caird, because, for instance, Sea Captain's Lodge in Liverpool was one of the associate ones for the rebellion, and it may be that Caird, which is a famous Scottish name in relation to seafaring terms, can be found in Glasgow, for instance, a main port for dealing with the West Indies. It may be that we can trace the Caird people back to their links with the West Indies. I merely suggest that.
Excellent.
I was just going to add that if you want those 2 copies of the close scans and the close archives, I have them both with me here right now.
I don't know what you like to drink, but I'll make sure you're not thirsty.
Fair enough.
Don Perignon.
I see a question.
Would it interest you to know that there is a... Oh, like that? Would it interest you to know that there is a brother in this audience who has already made a study of the Franken in The Hague?
Did you ask if there's a thought of doing an automated study of the Franken?
No. Would it interest you to know that there is a brother in this audience who has already made a study of the Franken in The Hague?
Well, if that's Louis Trebuchet, I know he's done absolutely breathtaking work.
No. Neil Wins-Morse. Right there. Who's terribly embarrassed I'm pointing him out.
Wonderful. I mean, this is, I know that Neil was scheduled to come to our workshop, and travel problems prevented him from coming in. And I know that Neil was particularly interested in the Franken. I didn't know that he had done that much detail. One of the things that's fun and humbling about doing something like this is you find out how many people share your passion, and how many people have done at least as much work as you have done, and possibly even more. So this is great news. We hope to set up a website at the PSO to study the Franken, and we will be, when we get something set up, we will be sure to share it with everyone who's registered for the conference. I think they either got bored or we answered all their questions.
If all questions have been resolved, remembering that there will be a site devoted to the discussion of the Franken problems and challenges on the PSO master site for the conference, I would like to ask Brent to comment just briefly on a subject that will be discussed in 2017, the Chevalier Ramsay, and his connection to all of this. The
Chevalier Ramsay is an interesting person in the history of Freemasonry. Scottish by origin, tutor to Bonnie Prince Charlie, French resident. He is most famous in Masonic circles for his oration that he supposedly gave. We know that it was published. We know that there is a copy in a municipal library, and in it he gave a history of Freemasonry. And perhaps the most famous line to come out of that, our ancestors, the Crusaders. And so what you have this is, as far as I know, is the first and earliest reference connecting crusading knights to Freemasonry. You have 2 ritualistic themes that seem to have appeared. One is the Scots Master, the Écossais degrees, which they discussed in the seminar previous in the auditorium. The first mention of Scots Masters is in 1733 in engraved list of lodges in London. And that is a ritual theme, or the theme of that seems to be Zerubbabel returning from Babylon to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple, possibly finding great things under the ruins of the temple. The second major theme in Masonic mythology is that of the crusading knights. And so Ramsay is the first mention of the crusading knights. After Ramsay mentions the crusading knights, in just a few years, you have the crusading knights have morphed into the Knights Templar, and then you have the chivalric stream, and you have the Scots stream, and as the two crossed the channel and cross-pollinated each other, you eventually started creating ever more complicated degree systems. You have, I believe it's a 10-degree system in the Most Secret Mysteries of High Degree Masonry Unveiled. There's a 13-degree system in the Allegorical Conversations. These become increasingly complex. You get then Franken's Rite of 25 degrees for the Order of the Royal Secret. That includes both the Scots theme of the return from Babylon to Jerusalem. It includes chivalric themes with the Kadosh and the princes of the royal secret. And then this finally morphs into the ancient and accepted Scottish rite of 33 degrees. So this will be great to see in 2 years what the workshop can determine about Ramsay.
Well, with that, and thanks to Navar for bringing the Franken manuscript all the way from Pakistan, Lahore, for our ability to look at that. We appreciated that very strenuous effort, and with the hope we'll see you all. And next year, as you know, the Bibliothèque Nationale will have an incredible exhibit on Freemasonry, and we will do something such as musical performance or forum to express our appreciation of the great hospitality and interaction with the Bibliothèque Nationale. We'll now conclude in the vestibule with a closing toast to 2017, and I again remind you, you're free to take any of the publications which are out there with compliments and our many thanks for the many miles you traveled to be with us and your contributions. Thank you.
Hold on, Bill.
Okay. Yeah. I don't hear what you're saying.
We have refreshments outside, a cocktail. Please join us. Thank you.